Good day everyone, welcome back for another lecture in the subject matter Introduction to Criminology. In today's lecture, we will be discussing the crime formula presented by Abrahamsen. So in his crime formula, it states here that there are predictors on how we can identify a certain person, whether he has a tendency to become a criminal. It also explains how a person will turn into criminality. So without further ado, let's move to the discussion. Abrahamsen presented a formula which can be seen above. The crime, or the letter C, stands there for crime equals T plus S over R. So C stands for crime, equals T stands for tendency, and S stands for the situation, and below that R stands for resistance to temptation. According to Abrahamsen, when the tendency added to the situation is higher than the resistance of a person to temptation, crime definitely will exist. So piece by piece, let us discuss the implication of this formula and how can we be able to use this in our field of study. So based on the positivist school of criminology, it points out there, or it claims there, that crime is an illness that can be treated in the same manner as we treat disease. So imagine if we try to address the existence of crime as we try to address the existence of a certain disease, then definitely the crime problem would move in a predictable manner, and with a high hope that we can be able to solve the existence of crime in the same manner as we solve or we find cure for different illnesses. So as we have stated, we're going to connect this crime formula to the positivist theory. Okay, let's first discuss the letter T. T stands for the tendency. Each and every individual living in this planet actually possess a tendency to be turned into a criminal. So that tendency is the same tendency that we have to develop different illnesses. So definitely the tendency is not within the control of a certain individual. We as a person don't have the control over the possibilities that we as a human, based on how we are constructed as an organism, don't have control on the manner we are made. So when we talk about the tendency, we are referring to a genetic problem. We might relate it also to behavioral problem or mental problem that a certain individual might possess, that these things that we might develop or we carry as a human being predisposes us to become a criminal. So if we're going to compare the biological makeup of a normal person to an abnormal person, and when we talk about abnormal person, let's say that person possesses some mental problem, behavioral problem, or even genetic problem. If we're going to compare them, definitely, even if the same inputs will be applied to them, the result will not be the same. So let's put this in a situation wherein two persons, one with the normal biological makeup, meaning he is not suffering from any mental illness or behavioral problems and so on, then another person, a person suffers from anger management issues. So clearly, this second person possesses now the what we call biological fault. So he possesses a behavioral disorder which can be blamed to his faulty genetic makeup. So if we're going to antagonize these two persons, who would likely to react and turn into criminality. Let's say we try to trigger the behavior of this person by presenting some kind of stimuli. Like for example, we are mocking that person, this normal person. He will then possibly just ignore the fact that he is being triggered to produce a certain behavior, while the other person, possessing a genetic fault, possessing an inherent criminal tendency, which is much higher than the normal person, will be subjected into the same stimulus, will definitely react in a manner that it would produce criminal behavior. In summary, we as a human being possess tendency to turn into criminality. We get angry all the time or sometimes, but then we control our behavior. We get jealous sometimes or most of the time, but then we don't turn into criminality. But then there are just those people who are highly inclined to criminality or highly affected by the same stimulus as we are receiving as a normal individual. And this person who have higher tendency to become a criminal will definitely get easily hooked into criminality. So what I'm pointing out here is we as a human being all possess criminal tendencies whenever we are triggered to be such. But there are those people that because of their biological makeup, they possess a higher tendency to become criminal than we usually are. And those tendencies are increased by some illnesses or what we call genetic fault, which makes them more prone to travel the path of criminality than we as an average individual. So let's say we get angry because of a certain circumstances, but then that's it. We do not turn into killing, we don't turn into assaulting someone because of our anger. But there are those people who can't really control their behavior whenever they are triggered. And that can be blamed into their genetic makeup. So, tendency. As we have stated, we all possess tendency to become criminal. However, there are those people who have higher tendency to be inclined into criminality. And that tendency is affected by their genetic makeup. Next is we have the situation. Okay? So situation is again beyond the control of the person who turns into criminality. When we talk about situation, we can probably mention the environment of the person, what type of society, what type of environment does that person lives in. Does his environment, his immediate environment, condemns criminality or not? Because this situation really affects the behavior of a certain person. Let's say, for example, he lives or that person lives in a family infested by criminality. Maybe his father is a criminal, his mother is a criminal, or some of his loved one is a criminal. So definitely the environment itself is no longer productive. Now, when presented an opportunity, these persons who have criminal infested environment will likely to commit crime compared to those persons that were raised in an environment where crime is seen as an unaccepted behavior. See? So that is with regards to immediate environment. What other situation makes the person turn into criminality? So let's say, for example, his economic environment, his social status. What else? What are the other factors that may turn a person into criminality? Let's say the person was triggered by extreme Anger. What are the situations that can trigger those things? So let's say, for example, you get into an altercation. This is the common things that is happening with regards to incidents of road rage. A person will tend to be aggressive wherein he is in a situation that puts him into a very irritable situation or unhealthy situation. For example, he is very drunk, he is already very anxious, or he is depressed, he is very stressed. This situation will definitely increase your tendency to become a criminal. Again, this is beyond the control of the person, clearly. Because we as a human being definitely don't want to put ourselves into a situation wherein we are going to suffer. As a human being, we tend to look for or we tend to seek for a situation wherein it will bring us pleasure. No one wants to put himself in a situation that will make him more suffer. So, as I have stated again, this is beyond the control of the person. You cannot claim that you can put yourself out from that situation. Like for example, the issue on poverty. It is stated that, most of the successful person clearly puts that it is the poor that makes them poor. But there are instances wherein no matter how much hard work you put into a certain work, if the situation doesn't really complement with all your hard works, then still you will become poor. The same thing also with regards to criminality. No matter how much you try to avoid to turn into criminality, if the situation will continue to haunt you to become a criminal, then it's really hard onto the part of that person. This is sometimes a justification of the persons of those criminals who became a criminal because of extreme poverty, having a mental problem, and so on. Now, if these two factors will add up together, there is only one way in order for us to hamper the further development of a criminal behavior, and that is what we call resistance. Resistance to temptation. Let's say you have a mental problem, plus you add up the situation wherein you are triggered to commit a certain act which can be considered as a crime. The only holding factor that remains is now the resistance of the person to temptation. How good the person in resisting from that opportunity, from that situation, and from those factors presented while ago. So this is now where the control of a human being plays part. You see, and that even a person, even possessing the factors we mentioned while ago, is already tempted to commit the act if his resistance to temptation is high, much higher than the tendency and the situation added, then definitely crime will not exist. But if the resistance to temptation of the person is low, definitely crime will exist. So let's say, for example, I put a 100,000 peso bill on the table and left it unattended. Then the person passed by, saw the money. He is in a situation wherein he really needs the money. And then you add that up to his inherent criminal tendency while as a human being. It is only a few seconds that remains whether the person will commit a crime or will become a law-abiding citizen. So if he picked that money and put it in his pocket and ran away, then definitely he becomes now a criminal. But then if he will not take the money, he resisted himself of taking the money despite his circumstances, then definitely he is not a criminal. So, what are the possible factors that comes into play in order to increase the tendency of the person to resist temptation? So, this is where the faith, the religion plays part, the upbringing plays part, and the person's principles will play part. See, that not all person who are suffering from poverty will tend to commit criminality. Why? Because probably their resistance to temptation is very high. Not all persons in need will turn into criminality because their resistance is higher than the opportunity and than the tendency they have as a human being. So this is where we as a criminologist or as an individual can intervene in order to prevent the existence of criminality. We shall increase the tendency of the person, of each and every individual, to turn into criminality. We help them develop a resistance in committing crime. Punishment will definitely plays part in increasing the tendency of individuals to commit crime. So if we have good punishment that will serve as a good deterrent, that will make a person think twice before committing crime, then definitely that is a good deterrence. What other program we can develop? What other methods we can use in order to increase the person's resistance into committing criminality? So education, that is also important. As we have stated a while ago, upbringing of the family, of their immediate family, is also important in order to develop a higher resistance to committing crime. Social awareness is also important, and many other programs that we can develop just for the purpose of increasing the tendency, or just for the purpose of increasing the resistance of an individual in committing crime. See that if we're going to look into criminality as a disease, as a problem that is beyond the control of humans, of an individual, we can develop a solution in order to combat the existence of this problem. We should stop looking into crime as brought by free will, as brought by demonic possession and so on. We should look at it as a social problem wherein the solution itself can be found in the surrounding environment and the biological makeup of a certain person. So with that, we can be able to come up with a good prevention program to address the existence of crime. We should not always look into punishment, because punishment is not the only way that we can reduce criminality. If we're going to look from the root of the existence of crime, then definitely we can develop a more flexible solution into the existence of this problem. So that is how a person will turn into criminality. A person will become a criminal if first his criminal tendency is high, and then a situation or opportunity will be given to him that will agitate more the criminal tendency of that person, and then the resistance of that person to temptation is very low. That is when a person will turn into criminality. So we cannot address the problem criminal tendencies because that is a biological makeup, unless we make some genetic improvement, then definitely that would be viable. The situation itself cannot really be avoided, because no matter how much we try to avoid to put ourselves in a situation that will make us more vulnerable to criminality, it is just by nature that we are being pulled into that instances. But of course, we can reduce our tendency to be involved in a certain situation that will make us a criminal. Let's say, for example, going out late at night. If you avoid that, you are reducing your tendency to be put into a situation that will make you turn into criminal. And then, the resistance to temptation, this is where the society plays an important role. How do we treat the problem is also part of the resistance to temptation. Do we educate the member of our society that much that they know that crime does not pay? Do we raise our children in a manner that we want them to become a productive member of the society? So all of those factors plays part on how a person will turn into criminality. If we are going to address them properly, then definitely we can be able to at least reduce the criminal tendency of individuals, and as well as the existence of this problem to our society. We just need to look into the problem, the existence of crime, in a more sympathetic manner than punishing them. Okay? So that's with regards to the crime formula and on the question how a person becomes a criminal according to Abrahamsen. I hope you learned something from this lecture. See you next meeting.